Hello there and welcome back to the League of Privateers. Abridged. In the previous part, we defeated the part of the Faustian Reich that was on our continent. That was pretty easy. We also took down a significant army from the Vikings up north, but we've still got plenty of work to do there. We also finished off the yellow Spanish guys on our continent, but again they've got plenty of stuff nearby for us to go after, and we have sent an army across the seas to start fighting them. But we're going to start this part off with a battle up top, because while my army was wandering down the road into further Viking territories, there was a Viking army coming the other way, so we've met them and let's battle. They have a nice defensive position on a hill, however, we have the Greystoke Ranger unit, the one that has tons of range, so we can stand back and just snipe at them, and this eventually causes the AI to aggro and start sending things forwards. First just the odd unit which we can beat back with our archers, and then eventually they start moving everything up, and it's go time. This enemy army is very heavily based on archers, like many of my own armies, so we can take advantage of this by just running around them and trying to get into melee quickly rather than the usual sit back and shoot strategy. So we essentially just run at them, and we can easily run at them from multiple sides where they have hills behind both of their flanks, so we can even kind of do downhill attacks into their flank. Very nice. It doesn't really come to much because the battle just ends immediately. Once we make contact, virtually everything routs. Maybe our guy has really high dread or something, we barely did anything to them. With that, most of the battle is just chasing them off the field to get enough kills for this to have actually counted. Eventually we get to some arbitrary amount, and there we go, we lost basically nothing and the enemy army is dead, so that's absolutely perfect. Now we continue on down the road. I've already scouted out our next target. We can see a settlement over there with our princess. Because I've been recruiting some reinforcements somewhat nearby, I decided to split this into two armies. So we'll bring a load of stuff up to be roughly near the first army, then send our second general out to make sure we don't get any betrayals due to our faction leader having no authority at the moment. We now get attacked by the vampire faction. You might remember they laid siege to one of the places we took off the Faustians last time. We have just some scraps inside. I did decide to fight this one because I thought maybe we can actually win by taking out the siege equipment. Didn't go all that well. You can see me here pulling troops back inside the wall. I had gone out to try and stop the ram to get more time to shoot fire arrows into it. However, once I got them to drop the ram, I tried to run back inside, and we got the classic issue where you can't get back inside fast enough and the gates don't close, things like that. So they end up actually following us in, and my plan to get more damage on the ram meant they didn't need the ram at all. Now they just rush in, and that's going to shorten this battle significantly, because in this mod the gates do take ages to open. From here we just die, but we did actually take out quite a few enemies with the towers and such, and a few arrows, killing a couple of hundred. That should make things a little bit easier for us to counterattack over there. We'll put something together from what we have left from fighting the yellow Spanish guys. Speaking of which, we are now going to do a big siege against them over on their continent. We've got a big army here, but so do they, and they also have a castle to sit inside, with 9 turns of siege as well. Inconvenient because it's difficult to attack and it's going to take a long time to avoid attacking them. But for now, we just stand there and make equipment. We can also kill the last little bits of the Spanish guys here on our continent in this really bad auto-resolve against one of their forts. That's that. So units like this will now be put together to go back and attack the Dracule faction that have just invaded our continent. With our Viking offensive, we see as we go down the road there's just another army coming our way, so we're going to have to fight them as well. This time they actually have a commander, which will make their morale a fair bit better. In this battle, the enemy started off with great positioning on the side of a mountain right next to us, but we could shoot them from our deployment zone. I thought what would happen is, just like in the previous fight, they would come down to attack us, so I was just standing here in battle formation, watching the slow motion fire by rank that the Greystoke Rangers go through. That's pretty good. We actually kill a few enemies, but they don't get aggroed. Instead, they run further up the mountain to a really good position. The way we got around this was to essentially just walk around the outside of the map, causing the AI to constantly back away from us, until we end up with this setup. I'm where they just were, they are where I just was. We completely swapped places over the course of a very long bit of manoeuvring. Now we're on top of the hill, and one of the nice things about these early Total War games is being uphill extends the range of ranged attacks, so we can now snipe at them on the other side of the valley over there and grab some early kills, and this time it does aggro them to come up the hill and attack us. This is great. Here are some axe-throwing cav coming at us and dealing some damage. I'm not really paying them too much attention because our archers should be able to kill them. Meanwhile, all the infantry have to make a really difficult walk up this near vertical slope. And on the way they're going to be getting shot a bit where there's line of sight anyway, and arrows will rain down on them from above. And strangely, we see units routing even before they finish making the climb, so that's a pretty good sign. Even with that command on their side, they're still suffering from morale issues. Maybe it is our general having tons of dread, I still don't actually know. We see another example of bad morale here. I come down the hill to engage on our right, and this unit just routs the second they take like one casualty, so clearly they're not interested in fighting us at all, and that's going to make our life pretty easy. We can swing around the cliffs from our right and rear attack everything that's going up on our left, thus pretty much winning the battle. So here we are a bit later, everything's just routing on contact, that balance bar swings in our favour, and we start just slaughtering everything. I'm pretty sure we're taking plenty of friendly fire damage as arrows continue to rain straight down into these blobs, but looks like I'm not attempting to stop that in any way. There was one last blob that fought on for a while. This is the blob that has their general in it. But once I outflanked them with some archers and a few gunners and shot into them, that I guess added the extra morale shock needed to get them to rout as well, thus ending the battle. But by this point we'd already killed everything else that's routing, so it's pretty much over, just a short rout phase to kill the general. Then I pressed the button accidentally and brought whatever that was up. It must have been near escape, because that's what I was looking for. Another decent victory with a pretty good ratio, not quite as good as the last one, but still very good, leaving us with plenty of strength to plough on down the road as planned and go after the next settlement. There is actually a somewhat substantial army inside there, so we need to pay attention to this. But I'm going to have my secondary army coming up next turn to help, and then we can just siege them out for a bit. Now here is a front that I'd almost forgotten about. The Fire Island assault. We still need to go and take the rest of this island up at the west end of the map. Here I'm just walking forwards because we don't really know where the enemy are. Handily enough, there's a bit of a choke point in the island that we have to go through, and the enemy are there. So we besiege another Aztec city. We can do that with 2 stacks, and again I'm just going to leave them under siege for a bit. Now we're switching to the Dracule campaign, because we need to put something together to go and push them back off of our continent, and here is what I have put together: an army spamming a whole bunch of pirates and archers. Now, a part of the enemy force was standing on the border there for some reason, so we can fight them on their own, making this counter-offensive easier than expected actually. I didn't want to do this fight. It's a fight where I was tempted to do the manual resolve just for the kills we would get, because they have tons of units with no shields, so if we just stood there and shot arrows for a while it would probably go well. Ended up not doing that because we have lives to live. After that we're now 1 turn away from hitting the target, and there's only half a stack left inside the castle, so that's all going to be fine. However, there was one minor mishap at the start of the next turn. The commander of the army, huge Cocklynn or something to that effect, has defected. He has now gone over to the Faustian Reich. I think maybe he was taken away by a princess or something. He might have got married, or maybe he's just betraying me because of the low authority. Not quite sure. There was no message that came up either way. So that's happened. At least though we can bring over this guy, Ricardo Dane or something. Let's call him Dicko Dane. He is going to be the new commander of this army, and he should be able to take this one on in. And the first order of business is to kill the traitor who has got over to the Reich, and that goes pretty well. That's that. You might be wondering why we're still at war with the Reich. I have been trying to get peace with not only the Reich, but most of the people we're at war with our limited diplomats, and it's always very demanding to get a ceasefire, so I end up not negotiating for it. Anyway, we move on and besiege that place. That's going to be an easy enough win in the next turn, which is happening right now. It's actually a terrible auto-resolve because the general inside was really high level, so he kills tons of my army, but we can't be bothered to do anything better than that, so we just take the losses and we'll make them again. And we've taken out that enemy force, including their faction heir by the looks of things. That's all very nice, but we still need to keep going, because since the war isn't over, they'll just invade us again. We're then going to change the theatre of war to be in their territory instead by immediately counter-invading with the merged together survivors from those two stacks. We go over to their little continent and immediately stumble across a barely defended castle. That's a lucky find, so we'll go in against that. The next thing that happened was probably designed by the game to undermine what I said earlier. I actually did manage to get a peace deal with the Faustian Reich. So that's the end of that. And it comes at a very good time, because my army out on their continent is not only surrounded by their territory, but is actually directly surrounded by their armies right now. They have a ton of stacks in the same region as me. I think they're also at war with the yellow guys, so something's going on here, and we might have actually been taken down in the near future, but it appears we've got out of that one. Now the men of Valhalla have an interesting diplomatic proposition for me. They want me to be their vassal. So clearly they think this is all going pretty well for them. We might need to put a bit more pressure on them, it seems. It's possible they control all of their continent up in the top right of the map, so they're actually a very powerful faction for all I know. It's just the bit in front of us doesn't look all that impressive. Now over on the Dracule continent, we can auto-resolve that castle that we had under siege. Basically nothing in there, so we're just going to rush on in and hope we don't die. It goes okay this time. Nice one. Now we have a castle to sit in. The question is, what's outside the castle? We have no intel on the rest of this continent. I ended up sending out one unit as a sacrifice to just kind of look around since we don't have any agents. And we actually discover something immediately. There is an enemy army just outside our castle, standing right there. So I guess we'll just sit in the castle now and see what the enemy do to us. I'm going to start recruiting an army to go and back them up over there eventually as well. As for our Viking war, the enemy eventually sally out. I think I completely sieged out this settlement. There's not much to this one because their army's damaged and we have two armies, meaning it's going to be another auto-resolve. This is an especially good time to auto-resolve because our second army would be not that useful in a manual resolve, or may not even take part in the fight depending on how it actually goes. Looks like it barely took part in the auto-resolve there actually. Well, the result was fine, that's the point, and we move on in. Unfortunately, my scout sacrifices do get attacked, but about half of them survive and retreat back to the castle. Then though, we spot like 5 or 6 enemy armies moving around in this area, many of them now queuing to attack us by the looks of things. So it seems we're going to be under some pressure over there. The rebels we had under siege on Fire Island sally out. I think again we've completely sieged them out in this case. And we get an okay result, just auto-resolve killing them. And we move on in, but still the island is not secure. We can see there is another region to take, so we'll end up moving north in search of that. Now some more bad news comes in. The Orange faction has randomly declared war on us, and immediately they're attacking us. They did border us back on our original continent. We don't really have anything here to defend because all the troops that were on this front line I already gathered together to go after the Dracule guys. So now we essentially just have to go along all of these frontline settlements, put together what we can, and start spamming out units. They can pretty much all recruit the basic pirates and the Native American style archers, which is the basis of our army, and that's been pretty good so far. So we'll just make a new army from the various settlements all together, use the big movement ranges to bring them together and get something ready to help out with that situation. The Uruks are invading our little spot in the middle continent again, although not with that many troops. We've got plenty of troops there who will now also have to defend against the orange guys, potentially. Against the Vikings, we move out to kill a small army that was hanging around near the settlement we just took. They sprint off at rapid speed. Then we form our armies together to have a smaller group stay behind to defend the settlement, and the larger group with all of the better and healthier units will go on to attack the next target, which has been identified up there to the northeast. We can drop a couple of watchtowers on the way, and by the looks of things it's not going to be very heavily defended. Now the Tahar Caliphate, the orange guys, they do make their first attack back on our home continent. In this case they're only attacking with 1 ram and 1 ladder, and I thought, well, that's not all that much siege equipment, so maybe we can steal a win here. by making it hard for the enemy to attack. The issue is that taking out a single ram isn't all that easy, even with all of our towers firing at it and our fire archers, because it has the classic Medieval 2 issue where units on walls can't shoot over the wall. So our guys are mostly shooting the fire arrows at the sky. The odd one might hit the ram, but it's not going to be the barrage needed to actually set the ram on fire. And that's going to be the end of that really. They're going to get into position, and once they're close enough to the gate there, because this wall is not very well designed, we won't be able to shoot in at the ram, and they'll be guaranteed to open the gate eventually. Also, they did climb up with a unit on ladders, although that unit got routed and then the enemy just ignored the ladders after that. So the ladder thing didn't really come to anything, it was all about the ram front. We killed tons of enemies while they were waiting for the gates to open, because they were waiting right underneath the towers, which was helpful for us. Once they did destroy the gate, I immediately went out with my terrible axe troops to delay them. This just allows the towers to shoot them a little bit more. But since we have to face everything, and that axe unit we have is the worst melee unit we have available, it's probably not going to do all that much, and soon they rout and the enemy break through. After that, they can just run to the capture point and there's not that much we can do to stop them. The good news is that the towers can shoot backwards, so once they're running down that main street there, we can grab a few more kills. Strangely, most of their army actually decided to stand underneath the gate. I'm guessing this isn't one of the gates that drops burning oil. If it was, we'd be getting a lot of kills right now. Over at the capture point, we've got a challenge battle, Mesopec warriors versus Mesopec warriors. We've got 21, they've got 28. Time to see how this goes as our routers start fighting the enemy's leading unit. Meanwhile, nothing is happening back over here. The archers can't see anything, our towers probably can't see anything. The enemy are cunningly hiding in the gate where we can't hit them. Perhaps deliberate, or perhaps a glitch. It seems to be working in their favour right now. As for the fight on the capture point, it actually went surprisingly poorly. While we started off roughly equal to the enemy, I think we only killed one of them and they killed all of us. Perhaps an effect of the difficulty level. I believe I'm playing on hard, which gives the AI some stat boosts, although it doesn't say what. And it may also be because in the earlier Total War games, the effects of numbers are more important, since you can stun lock people by attacking them from multiple sides, and generally take advantage of actually surrounding people and attacking them with more guys. So, long story short, we die over there, they take the capture point. I thought maybe I could send my archers to go get it back, since the rest of the enemy army is just kinda glitched out. But as I started moving, one of their horses touched my unit and then our guys glitched out and wouldn't take any orders. I think I was ordering them to fire into the blob here. It takes them a long time to actually do it. But eventually we see some volleys shot off towards the blob. By this point the time limit's starting to get a little bit close and we're probably not going to be able to do anything with this battle. I thought maybe I could still sprint and stop the timer, but there are enemy units between me and the capture point as well. So it doesn't happen, especially after my guys just rout, so that's the end of that. But we did kill more than half of the enemy army, so a pretty decent last stand there. We almost get caught in a siege draw-out, where someone I recruited at that castle I took off the Dracules ends up spawning outside because the castle is full, not a foot of space for them. But by not fighting, we avoid being drawn out, and actually they don't pursue and attack us again, so we get away without losing anything there. You might have noted that a couple of enemy armies were walking off towards this coast, and I believe that this is the reason our allies, the Sicrocax people, whatever they're called, have also landed nearby. That's good timing. That's going to provide a nice distraction so that we don't get spammed with like 6 or 7 stacks at the same time. In order to get my new units back inside the castle, I needed to sacrifice one more of the units already inside. So we're doing some more sacrificial scouting. We learned the location of the next enemy city. It's very nearby, so that's good to know. Now against the Tahar, we can set up a defensive line that's going to be difficult for them to get through, because while we've lost one territory, all the other territories spammed out a bunch of units real fast, and we can just garrison up the front line so that that area will be stable. On Fire Island, moving forward, reveals a new settlement, so that's that. This is the final part of the island. I think it's just the same army we were facing at the other two there, basically, so we set up a siege. We also set up a siege against the Vikings, rushing over here to face this settlement with not very much inside, just need something to allow us to auto-resolve that realistically. And you can also see We've scouted out the next target after that, another barely defended location. Unfortunately, our scout sacrifices are going to be sacrificed, and in this case, because there's not a foot of room in the castle, they can't retreat back inside it, they just straight up die. Now more distraction happens. This is perfect. The enemy are going to attack our allies. I figured our allies would die here, but no, they don't. They actually appear to win that battle, and they've killed a whole bunch of the enemy. That's going to make our presence here much easier. However, they are now going to go ahead and set up this siege, which I'm surprised they didn't do a couple of turns ago. They're going to leave 2 stacks here to maintain the siege, so it will be difficult for us to sally out. I'm just going to leave it there and hope they attack so we can use the walls to our advantage. But back over at the rebel place, there was an unexpected battle. What appears to be happening is they tried to bring up some reinforcements to double team us, but for whatever reason they've ended up fighting us without the reinforcements who were just out of range. So this has just turned into a pointless sally, where we're going to have a great opportunity to kill the enemy without having to do any siege stuff. I could move backwards and take a position on a hill, perfect for our army composition, with a whole bunch of archers and gunners. We've also got the double melee line thing going here, where our worst melee troops are out in front to deplete enemy stamina, and then the real melee troops will fight afterwards. And yes, the guns were mostly firing for this battle, so that's perfect. They could just about see over the top of stuff and get sniping. Our gun cav are distracting enemy units, maybe occasionally shooting at them over there. They don't need to kill them, they just need to stop them being in the melee, because those enemy melee units are going to be better than mine. Here was a case where the gunners are being a bit naughty. They were on fire at will, but it said they couldn't shoot, they were just standing there. Turned it off and on again to see if that would do anything. It says they're firing, but they're not. And then finally, when we give the manual order, they do start firing. So that's the same pattern we saw in the past. For some reason, fire at will doesn't always work. That's handy. Things still go pretty well though. We do lose quite a few melee troops, but it's mostly the pure trash like the Mesopec warriors who are just here to die. They're all just mercenaries, so they can die off and that'll be the end of that. I'm focusing on chasing down routers rather than actually finishing off units on the front line, because we want to make sure we get enough kills here to take advantage of the AI's mistake by fighting us at all. The guys that were still in the fight and just weren't going down are eventually brought down with this strategy. We redeployed the guns to be right behind their front line and start shooting into them. This was actually less devastating than I thought. I'm guessing our guys are really inaccurate because we appear to get barely any hits, even with that nice long line firing. But after a while, that's going to have an effect and gradually kill them, and just broadly speaking, we have enough stuff to overwhelm the enemy and get a chain rout going. We even chased some routing units all the way to the city centre, which is perfect. If we control the street to the city centre, they won't be able to do the thing where they get back and then stop routing. So we can kill everything as they go over there. Soon, this is what happens. The result was fine, it actually went pretty well, and as mentioned, a lot of our casualties were the ones that nobody cares about. So, after that, the settlement is taken and the long and brutal campaign for Fire Island is finally over. We've also got some plague now killing people over at our capital. Inconvenient, but aside from that, a happy day. So that's where I'll end this part. Next time we're going to go large against the Tahar Caliphate, or should I say they're going to go large against me as they quickly become our main rival.